We'd like to welcome everybody to today's special Ask OU Kosher Yom Kashrus Yomim in conjunction with Yeshiva Rabbeinu Yitzchak Elchanan YU. This is a project of the Harry H. Barron Ask OU outreach programs that we have here at the OU. My name is Rabbi Eli Elef. I'm the Director of Community Relations here at OU Kosher. It's my pleasure to be host today for this special event. Before we get started, I will ask everyone to mute themselves unless specifically asked otherwise. There will be time at the end of each session, hopefully, as well as at the end for questions and answers. I'd just like to go through briefly today's schedule, and then we'll get into what's going on. So our first guest today, we're first off, before posting B'chvei Achsanya, we'd like to thank the rabbinic training staff at YU under Rabbi Menachem Penner's leadership, Rabbi Larry Rothwax and Rabbi Eitan Schnall for arranging today's presentations and seminar, and they get a big yasher koach for everything that they've done behind the scenes to make this happen. First off, and I'm going to introduce him separately in another minute, we're going to have Rabbi Elephant, who's our Chief Operating Officer of OU Kosher. Followed up by that, we'll be discussing different types of Machlei Akum with Rabbi Eli Gersten, who's our Safra D'Daina here at the OU. Then we'll be discussing food service event Shabbos catering with Rabbi Dov Schreier, who's our Director of Food Service at OU Kosher. We'll be doing a practicum on Bedikas Kolaim with Rabbi Daniel Sharat, and then we'll be discussing the kashas of fish with Rabbi Chaim Goldberg. Finally, with questions and answers with Rabbi Shachter Shlita and Rabbi Ganak, who's the CEO of OU Kosher. Everyone should have been emailed out a source book as well, so we ask that you can refer to that for both the schedule of today's events, as well as any Mar Makomos and additional documents that might be helpful to guide you along in this journey through Kashrus today. We're going to start with Rabbi Elephant, who is our Chief Operating Officer and Executive Rabbinic Coordinator of OU Kosher, a man who I see plenty of people already are familiar with him through his Daf Yomi Shurim that spans the globe and the amount of talmidim that he has because of that. Besides the fact that he's a terrific boss, as well as someone who keeps us going on a daily basis, whether we're in our office or working remotely, Kashrus still chugs along. So Rabbi Elephant, I welcome you to speak now. Rabbi Elephant's going to give an overview of OU Kosher, where it is, where it stands, and how we can best help you as well. Rabbi Elephant.
Thank you very much, Rabbi Elef, and thank you to everybody who joined us today to listen. Rabbi Goldstein asked me a moment ago if I said a Daf Yomi shir today, and I responded I actually said two already, and one of them was in a Gemara that I'm a little ahead, Daf Kuf Ches. And there's a Gemara which I think is so important to today's sessions that you're going to be enjoying. The Gemara discusses if you're allowed to write Sifrei Torah, Tefillah, Mezuzah on the hide of a fish. And the Gemara says we need Eliyahu Navi to come and answer the question. And the Gemara asks, what's Eliyahu Navi going to add to this discussion? So the Gemara says Eliyahu Navi is going to be able to tell us if Paskuzu Hamasan. The simple explanation of Paskuzu Hamasan means are they still clean or unclean? If they're not clean, obviously we can't use them for writing Sifrei Torah, Tefillah, and Mezuzahs. And many Mefarshim, actually the Rishonim, the Ran already, asked the question, you don't need Eliyahu Navi to tell us if something is clean or dirty. Just look at it, smell it, and you'll know yourself. So the Sfas Emes says a beautiful pshat, which I think will frame today's discussions. The Sfas Emes says that we know all animals, in order to be able to eat them, we first have to go through the shechita process. Fish don't have to go through any shechita process to be eaten. You could eat a fish without any shechita, without any of those various difficult halachas. Says the Sfas Emes, animals that are sanctified by going through the shechita process have that kedusha in them, and therefore are proper to be used to write Sifrei Torah, Tefillah, Mezuzahs. Something, however, a fish that did not go through a shechita process doesn't have that kedusha that infuses the fish. And therefore, it may not be something that you should write Sefer Torah Tefillah Mezuzah on. When I learned that Sfas Emes, I repeated the Sfas Emes in my shir. I thought to myself, I think that the lesson here is that kosher food, besides that it's the mitzvah that the Torah, of course, tells us that we're only allowed to eat kosher food, macholos asuris are very serious isser. I think there's much more to be said. Kosher food, when going through the process of making kosher food, whether it's, of course, shechita on an animal or all the other parts of the process that you're going to hear about today in Mitzvah Shem, about making food kosher, it infuses a kedusha into the food. And by infusing that kedusha into the food, we're infusing kedusha into our lives when we eat that kosher food. And therefore, we're so anxious, particularly in these days, many mitzvahs that we're so accustomed to do, we're not able to do for the last couple of months, whether it's tefillah b'tzibur, whether it's learning in a Beis Medrash, or other things that we're so accustomed to do in our avodas Hashem that we've been unable to do. But the one constant, I was thinking that as much as they closed down all of the city and they closed down all of the stores, they realized that you can't close down the supermarkets because people have to eat. And you can't close down kashrus either because people have to eat kosher food, because that is what still is infusing kedusha into our lives. But actually, it's not just on the ruchnistige approach that I want to mention. It also is on a very practical mention. I've been getting a lot of calls. I was interviewed recently in a very popular publication, and I've been getting a lot of feedback about that interview regarding, well, how is the OU managing in a world where you can't go anywhere? And in fact, the particular emphasis in that conversation was China, where China, I'm not going to go into the discussion of China's role in the COVID virus. It's not my area of expertise, so I have no right to discuss that. But one thing we know, that China has been essentially locked down. And the OU itself certifies over 600 facilities in China, which is amongst the close to 10,000 facilities we certify in over 100 countries around the world, in every one of the 50 states of the United States. And that issue became how to grant certification in a world that we can't visit, because the basis of our hashgacha, there are really two types of hashgacha that you're going to hear about today. One type of hashgacha is where food has to be prepared with full-time rabbinic supervision. So of course, if I mentioned a moment ago shechita, so you can't have kosher shechita without shoichtim, without mashgichim sort of watching the salting process, without mashgichim supervising the removal of the different parts of the animal we may not eat, without mashgichim checking the lungs of the animal and the other parts of the animal to determine if it's kosher. I heard Rabbi Elif said that one of your first speakers today is going to be our distinguished colleague, Rabbi Gersten, who's going to be speaking about Bishalakim. I presume he's going to be speaking about Gvinasakim. So again, these are foods that you have to have personal Jewish involvement. To have kosher cheese, kosher hard cheese, nothing to do with Chol Yisrael, you need to have a frum Jew pour in the rennet. To have Bishul Yisrael, you need a Jew to turn on the fire. But when we speak about, and so in those situations, we're only able to give hashgacha with mashgichim present. And if we can't get mashgichim there, or the company can't allow mashgichim or whomever to be at doing what they have to be doing, there's no discussion. We can't just give hashgacha, and we can't make that available. It's not debatable. But then the vast majority of facilities that we certify in the United States and around the world are facilities that are essentially all kosher, always making just kosher food, also typically only making just pareve, or typically just making dairy. And we have a Mashiach coming in on a unannounced basis. We come in on an unannounced basis. When I say we come in on an unannounced basis, we also determine how often the Mashiach should come. For example, if we're certifying a facility that is bottling water, so our policy is that we will never give a hashgacha without personally visiting the facility. But obviously, there's not that much to be concerned about in a water facility, and we'll visit it infrequently. A facility that's using complicated ingredients. So if you'll have a facility that's a bakery, so it's an all kosher bakery, there's no concern, it's all pareve or it's all dairy, everything there is supposed to be kosher, but obviously there's a myriad of ingredients there. And because they have so many ingredients, we need to make sure the company agrees that they're only going to use ingredients that they've told us they're going to use, that we've allowed them to use. But the way we give the hashgacha, and this is the basis of what you're going to be hearing today, is on a mirsus. And a mirsus means that we could show up, and we do show up, on an unannounced, regular basis, and that keeps them scared. The word mirsus makes them concerned that they're going to get caught if they do something wrong. So what happens now in the new world, where you can't just show up, they won't let you in? So we've had to deal with this, because again, we can't be left in a world that people won't have what to eat. And that is all the more so complicated when it's not just facilities here, but it's facilities all over. So we've begun to give hashgacha on a virtual basis. Again, it's a temporary situation. I can't emphasize enough that this is not something that we're anxious to do. And I could tell you the good news that we have been monitoring. And the way I could see that the world is, Baruch Hashem, getting better, because I get a report every week of how many visits we did that week, and how many were virtual, and how many were real. And the numbers, Baruch Hashem, have been going steadily in the direction that there are many more real visits than virtual visits. For example, last week, we were already up to 900 visits were conducted that I have a record of, and 600 of them approximately were done in the real old-fashioned way. 300 were done in a virtual manner. But again, even when we do it on virtual, we do the following. We have a mashgiach who knows the facility. We call them rabbinic field representatives, who knows the facility, going together virtually with FaceTime or Zoom or whatever, looking around the facility. They're not knowing where we're going to ask this person to work and to walk and let us see what's going on. What we also do is forensic hashgacha. So what we're asking the company to do is give us the invoices and the shipping records of all the ingredients that they're receiving. And we're making sure that it makes sense with the amount that they're using. And we're seeing where those ingredients, again, we're focused more on the sensitive ingredients. When I use the word sensitive, I mean sensitive in the eyes of kosher, to make sure that we're getting a good picture of what's going on in the world, in the facility, and in all the ingredients that are being used in the facility. But what really I'm trying to say, besides answering the question that's in the mind of everybody on this call, so how does the OU continue to work in this world? So all of us who work in the office, we have over 50 Rabbanim in our headquarters in Manhattan, are all working out of home, but we're all connected with each other. We meet and speak regularly. We had incredible siyata d'shmaya that as we saw this coming, what we were able to do is set up our system that we could work completely remotely. So even though we haven't been in our office for many months and don't know when we will be returning, we're able to access not just obviously our emails and messages, but all information we need in order to be able to give the hashgacha And that's how we're able to also be in touch on a regular basis with all of the mashgichim and all of the factories. What we weren't doing was, when a company wants to get OU supervision, the first thing we always do is have what's known as an initial inspection. I guess in the real world, it would be called a feasibility study, where we have somebody go visit the facility and see what's going on to determine if and how we could give hashgacha. That we obviously did not do during the period that we cannot get into factories. Now that we could, Baruch Hashem, get back into factories, that is resuming. But again, we're very, very focused on one hand, maintaining high standards of kashrus, being able to, however, deliver kosher food to the community that still very much needs to eat, but also being able to use, and then I think will probably be the theme of today's discussions, to be able to use modern technology and use all of the chachma that exists in the world to be able to maintain these standards and make sure that all of us are still able to enjoy as much kosher food as we would like, still supervised at the highest standards. So I'm sure you're going to find this discussion today extremely educational and enlightening, and certainly I think the timing at this time of our lives and this time of the history of the world will be very much informative to you and to the people that you work with, and we're anxious to hear your comments and your questions as the day goes on. Thank you very much for inviting us, and we hope that this will be the first of many other occasions. Rabbi Elif introduced himself as the Director of Community Outreach at the OU. He was just recently named to that position. His predecessor, unfortunately, Rabbi Grossman, was nifter a couple of months ago, and one of Rabbi Elif's jobs and one of his responsibilities, and something that we're going to be very much focused on, is communicating with Rabbanim, people who are currently Rabbanim, our future Rabbanim in Klal Yisrael. We believe that this relationship, this communication that we're developing between ourselves and yourselves is incredibly important, as you are the people who will be getting or are getting the shilas from your communities and informing you of what is going on and making ourselves constantly available to inform you what's going on will make us all able to do the avodas hakodesh that we are charged with, of making sure that our bodies are nourished with macholos ksheris, with macholos that bring kedusha to our lives. Thank you very much.